I'm reading some poetry tonight, which I feel inspired to read. Don't mind this rocking, I've got it balanced very precariously. This poem is called Ancestral Leaves, and it was published as a blog on the 15th of December 2010. And I've just written a short piece prior to the poem. I wrote this for a Carew friend of mine who I felt inspired by. I gave him a 118-year-old leaf to remember. In Australia, there was much pain around the stolen generation as Aboriginal children had been removed from their parents and forcibly placed in white families as part of the White Australia policy that sought to integrate them into European culture. This occurred in the 19th and 20th centuries and was part of a trend worldwide. It was also to breed out their Aboriginality as they were seen as primitive savages. This, of course, never worked. The truth was they were a deeply gentle people, and still are, who had no notions of mine and yours, ownership and possession. They were deeply integrated into nature and they identified completely with it. They developed over time a cosmology of spirits, ritual and the dream time, which taught them about time, space and the natural world in a spirit of equality. In truth, they were and will become our teachers of our true nature, for they still remember their dreams. I'm just trying to remember who I gave this to. It was a 118-year-old tree. I think it was Bill Della, who was at La Trobe. I think it was him. He was a union guy. He was very interesting. Like when I used to be at La Trobe, I used La Trobe for a place to contemplate. I didn't have much money, so couldn't get myself an office. When you find yourself in a vocation like I have, where peace is really what I'm here for, I'm here to learn it as well as teach it. It's very hard because it's not a business. You see, I'm working from a perspective of humanitarian. I'm a peacemaker, so money is not what inspires me. It's not what motivates me. It's a spiritual experience in actual fact, because you're expanding upon that which is universal within us as humans. I have worked obviously in the business community, but it wasn't natural for me because I don't like dealing. I don't like doing deals. I didn't like being seen to be. I wanted to be myself. And as money's not the huge motivator in my life, I was never drawn to making lots of money. It never seemed important to me. And I don't have a fear of poverty. Obviously today I'm living homeless without income. But really my psyche is such that it doesn't really worry me that much. At times I have my moments like anybody does, but everybody has moments even at work. So all our lives are peppered with moments where we might get down or we might be joyful, what have you. But I personally don't see failure. I never have. I only see a sort of an unfolding of our true nature. And I don't see others as failures either. I see them as living out the lives that they're meant to live out. They might see themselves as failures, but I don't see them that way because I don't think you can fail. You can the only proviso with that would be you could fail to see your greatness. And I think majority do fail to see how great they are because they've lived in environments where they have not been shown through the eyes of the other looking at them how beautiful they really are. As a clown, when I clowned on the streets, I saw the beauty in every face. It's a lived experience for me. I believe I saw people as they truly are. Because when you are clowning and people start laughing, the mask comes down and they connect. And it feels like family. It really does. So when I met Bill, he was really lovely to me. And We used to sit and have coffee from time to time. I didn't have that many friends at La Trobe, but he would sit with me and we'd talk about, world events and what's going on. But I really saw him as a friend. And I remember when I came back from Perth briefly to Melbourne, I saw him walking along, I think it was Nicholson Street. And I saw him and I thought, I can't stop. I had to go somewhere. But there was a moment where I thought, should I stop? Should I see him? And, I found out some years later that he died. And he'd also been promoting peace. He was a peacemaker. I didn't really know him that well, but I do know that he treated me unconditionally. And it was actually through Bill that I met Scott Ritter, who was a senior weapons inspector in Iraq. It was Bill who told me that Scott was coming to Australia. He's an American. And I just had this feeling I need to meet with him, but I didn't know why. So Bill arranged for me to come to a lecture at the University of Melbourne, which was only filled really 1/3 full. And after I heard Scott's, because I didn't know anything about Scott Ritter, when I heard his lecture, he was the most powerful speaker. And I was really impressed. I mean, he was speaking about the US war in Iraq as an illegal war of aggression. He had some very critical statements to make about the CIA, of which he was a part because he was an operative himself. And I remember I met with him and had dinner, and he'd written a book, Waging Peace. And I was with other people who I didn't know very well. I only knew Bill. And it was there. I was going to interview him because I was on radio at the time. And I thought we'd just be interviewing at the restaurant, but he invited me back to his hotel. So I went back. He was on the 10th floor, and I'd never met a spy before. And there I was sitting in a room with Scott, very big man, I remember that. And I was sitting on the floor. I'd completely forgotten, I didn't think to get on a chair. It was just the nature of the way the room was set up. I just sat on the floor. And I know at some point as I was talking about peace, I was actually talking about Real Hope, my peace, nonviolence and anti-bullying program. I wasn't talking about Iraq. Most people probably would have, but I felt to share with him my inspiration around peace. Anyway, he got a chair for me and he goes, oh, yeah, please sit on a chair. And I have written this in my book, A Fool for Peace. But I remember the two of us looking at each other. He was the soldier and I was the clown, the peace clown. And he'd never met a clown, and I'd really certainly never met an intelligence officer before. So we're kind of interested in each other, like, you're new. And I asked him, what he would do if he got picked in a fight. And he goes, I'd pay my tab and I'd leave. And he goes, tell me, what's it like to be a clown? And I said, well, you love everybody. I said, I wouldn't even step on an ant. And here I was with someone who could kill people easily. It's not my nature. I brought poetry with me and I gave it to him, actually. But I liked him as a person. Like, I just sat there and chatted like I would really to anybody. And he had a different world that he was living in. They often talk about our world, those in the intelligence community. They call themselves brothers and sisters, and there's, brotherhoods in there as well. I'm becoming much more aware of who they are now. I'm going to go to the poem in a moment, but I'm just sort of feeling to pause for a moment. What was interesting about that meeting was that he was listening a lot. So this is usually the mark of an intelligence officer. But I think what would have been better for him would have been just to relax and communicate with me. It's not about him needing to gain the information. It was about a symmetry to come together and share. And that, of course, is what the indigenous do. They deeply listen, but not as an intelligence gathering operation. Not that he was necessarily gathering intelligence on me. I don't think he was. I doubt it, because he was really there outing the US government in his talks. And I think it was his training. He was just used to listening deeply. But the indigenous listen deeply in a way that comes from spirit. So when I go still, for example, because I'm feeling very strongly to close my eyes, the deep listening is actually listening to yourself, not the other party even. I mean, the other party you will listen to, of course. But the really deep listening is within oneself. And perhaps with Scott, he did do deep listening because he became a whistleblower, his conscience, and certainly the passion in his speech. You could see he really had strong values and he really saw his allegiance to his own country. There was an honourable energy around what he was conveying and very intelligent. He was very articulate. There was a sense of admiration that he inspired. So that moment, I feel grateful that I had the opportunity to meet with him. I knew nothing about him, which is normally the case with me whenever I meet anyone really well known. Helen Caldecott, I did a bit of reading around, but I was inspired to travel 2,000 kilometres to meet her for a coffee. It was because I was feeling inspired around peace. I dreamed I was teaching peace, and I felt to Google peace, and Helen came up. And then I found out about La Trobe having a peace course. And then I felt to go and talk to Tom Waber, he was the doctor, Dr. Tom Waber, who was the expert on Gandhi. So I sort of felt to meet with him first. And then I did the drive up to Matcham, which was a 2,000 kilometre round trip. And I literally went there for coffee and then headed back to Sydney because it's north of Sydney, Matcham. It's near Gosford. And I had an afternoon with Helen Caldecott. And she was the one that informed me, about the Heritage Foundation and the Carlisle Group. I knew nothing about these things. I knew nothing about her. Not really, apart from what I read. I could see she was an expert on, weapons and nuclear weapons, and she had been a doctor and really just a citizen who chose to inform herself. And then she went out public speaking. She was a doctor, so she was looking at the health impacts of nuclear explosions and stuff. So we spent time together, her and I, and I felt that was rather important because she told me to go back to Melbourne and study peace. So I did. So Scott was kind of in that room learning about peace, and he said to me he would rewrite his book. I don't know if he did, but he hadn't thought of peace as an inside thing. He saw it as waging peace, like a military operation. Peace is not like that. What I tried to explain to him was that the values are at the centre here. When you integrate values, you can't fake them. You can't just say, I'm an ethical person and I'm with some centre for it. You have to actually integrate those ethics if you're going to be seen to be real and authentic. So what I wrote with Real Hope was integrating values. It actually helps you to feel life more deeply. It helps you to deeply listen to yourself, because those values that are natural within humanity are the navigators. They're naturally within us in order to help us navigate the terrain of life. Now, if you disconnect those values, those virtues, those emotional channels, you're actually not going to see the full spectrum, the full picture. You're only going to be identifying with the mind. Now, the mind can't see the full spectrum. And that word feels right because it's colour spectrum that I'm talking about. The thought forms are black and white. The emotional array is all colours of the prism. Real hope is like a prism. So when you see through the colours rather than black and white, right and wrong, them against us, when you look at full colour spectrum, you start to see the depth in the story that you're looking at. When you're looking through the prism of responsibility, you have the ability to respond, you'll speak up. When you're looking through and feeling empathy, you will join with that other and imagine yourself as them. When you become aware, you learn, you start to gather information to understand the nature of that conflict. Conflict mapping would be a good way of looking at awareness, and also going still like I do to actually feel the world, to feel the inner wisdom. Love, of course, if you look at through something with love, so if I look at corporations with love, if I look at polluters with love, if I look at serial offenders with love, if I look at those who appear to be causing a lot of harm with love, what do I see? I see ignorance. Again, I go back to this other video, God as the innocence of ignorance. Meaning, when you're ignorant, you don't know that you don't know. And all I can do is present another way of seeing to those others and feeling, and it is their decision where they go from here. So love, so it's real. Hope, H is honesty. So when I look through eyes of honesty, I have to be truthful. The fingers come back and points back at me. It's always emanating from me. Truth is love, is peace. It's a clear seeing. It's seeing without a story, as Byron Katie would say, which is true. So you don't have all these things hanging on it, judgments and negative mantras around it. Oneness is looking through oneness, is we are one, we are family, we're one breath, we're one world. What I do to another, I do to myself, would be a natural feeling of oneness. Peace is the yin and the yang, the alpha and the omega. Peace is balance, homeostasis, it's the scales of justice. It's equality, it's a tone. Enjoyment is having fun, and it's an inner joy. It's not pleasure seeking. Many people are seeking through addictive behaviours and various substances to have a feeling of happiness because they don't feel it within. When you actually have a natural joy, which I do, you won't need any alcohol or drugs. I mean, occasionally I do have a drink, but I only do it to socialise. I don't really buy it. I'm not really interested. So the joy for me comes from the oneness that I feel with a higher intelligence. That's where my true joy is. When I'm a clown, I love seeing people happy. When I see them smiling or giggling, I just naturally join with them. So I enjoy. So joy is it's an inner joy. And the last one there is real hopes. So S, service. When you integrate all those values, and integrate means lived experience of values. It's not a conceptual remembering. It's actually feeling it. Then you see the world in a different light. And that's why I became a peacemaker, was I started to see the world in a different light as I started to awaken. So it wasn't, I must go and save the world or the world needs peace. It was more that I just literally had a shift in consciousness, which led me to various teachings, which awakened to me the truth of who I am. And then the rest of this experience is really about catching up with that truth and living it. And of course, one has to weed the garden, you know, none of us are perfect. So we are part of this tree of life. And my life is committed to that harmony. And I may make mistakes along the way, but ultimately that's what I'm seeking to convey and seeking to integrate as harmony. So that brings me to the poem Ancestral Leaves that I'm pretty sure I gave to Bill, Bill Della. So this is a tribute to Bill, who was a beautiful man. Ancestral Leaves. The powerful indigenous mantra is identity with country, with land, with nature, with spirit. For to walk and leave a small footprint is the greatest testimony to peace, and the encyclopedia of knowledge within bush wisdom preserves the environmental movement, for each can hold hands and learn and remember that we are all one land, one people, one heart. For that can be seen clearly, for we are the tree of humanity, and you and I are one leaf. For each of us gives shade or cast a shadow. I am choosing to share. I am choosing to care. For I respect diversity and embrace difference within unity, as friends, as family. This leaf is 118 years old, and I give it to you as a peace treaty, as a peace offering. For I can say sorry as I feel the pain. But really, I want to say, go for it. Leave the past behind. Await the leaf to drop to the ground. For when it is ripe, all will be forgiven. For our greatest power is truth in reconciliation, in affiliation, in participation. For our world is great because of you. I will leave you with these ideas, for our true nature is harmony and cooperation, sharing and goodwill to all. For the rainbow serpent is all colours. Mixed together becomes white light, and that is my dreaming, for each piece leaves an imprint on the earth. For the ancestors leave wisdom around the sacred fire to reflect and remember our sacred pact. So that's ancestral leaves. When you truly feel that oneness with nature, everything changes. What we do to another, we do to the self, always. So I send you peace and love. And to reconnect with your true nature. Thanks. Bye.